Hi everybody, I'd like to thank the Hybridfest team, Linda, Bill Robbins, Eric Powers, and Richard Steves for promoting an event such as this. One of the things that you see here, besides all the hybrids, is we try to take it up to another level and get a little bit more fuel economy to lower our emissions, lower our fuel consumption, which only helps all of us. And one of the ways that we do that is through hypermiling. If you don't know what the term means, hypermiling is beat the EPA on a basic level, year-round combined. For a Prius, that'd be 55 miles per gallon this year. We have an 08 EPA spec showing the Prius around 46 to 48 miles per gallon. It's not set in stone yet, but we'll go a little bit into that later. And then we'll have a question and answer period afterwards to lay it all on the line. If you have any questions for me or anybody over at my booth, most of the experts are over there. I'm just promoting CleanMPG and beating the EPA is basically my business. So with that, I don't have any handouts here, but of course everything's available online. In fact, my presentation here is based off of my beating the EPA, whys, and how to hypermile. And I basically start off by going over the EPA test cycles, and there's going to be 5 of them for the 08 EPA specs. There used to be just 2, and those 2 EPA specs were so mild that I guess you look at the average driver, the way they accelerate, the way they decelerate with their brakes, the higher speeds that people travel today, it makes the EPA specs on a car like a Prius at 55, that's the average for the 6051. It makes it almost impossible for the average driver, but with the tools that are built into the Prius, 55 is pretty easy, in my opinion, and I think there's a lot more. And as you saw at the Fuel Economy Challenge yesterday, we have Jared Parrish back there. He was the winner at 110 miles per gallon. This was a slow city drive, but as always, we've all driven below 50 miles per hour. Otherwise, you'd be driving through the back of your garage when you come home. And during that period, you can really make your hybrid sing. So let me get started with the basics of the EPA test cycle. It was based off of 1973's test cycle found in the LA area, both a city and a highway test. Very mild acceleration rates, very slow, I'd say slow speeds, with a top speed of 60 and an average speed of 48 miles per hour on the highway test. This was LA in 1972. So it's not uncommon to see today the average driver on the highways around Madison, between Madison and Milwaukee, at 70, 75. So no wonder nobody can meet 50 miles per gallon in a Prius. Basically, it comes down to there's a speed quotient, there's a setup quotient, and then there's the person behind the wheel quotient. And with techniques available to us today, you're going to find that those EPA numbers are actually way too low. And it's my job and my passion to make sure that everybody at least has a choice in making that happen. I just wanted to go over the EPA's basic fuel economy test schedule characteristics and the new ones. The old ones, the old city test had a 20 mile per hour average, top speed of 56 miles per hour. The freeway test had a 48 mile per hour average and a 60 mile per hour top speed. Well, there were 3 new tests added this year, and that's why you're going to see next year, from next year on, all vehicles have a new EPA number attached to the vehicle. The high-speed test actually goes up to 80 miles per hour, and its acceleration rates are 3 times what the old city test was. So when you see the new numbers, you know that they're based on somebody driving a Prius at 80 miles per hour, dropping back down to 0, accelerating back up to 80 multiple times. And that's why you're going to see a Prius's highway number probably down around, let's say, 42, 44 miles per gallon next year. And it's not uncommon for a new driver to actually, that's not trained to watch his fuel consumption displays, get 42 to 44 miles per gallon because they're driving at 0 to 80 and 80 down to 0 and not using the tools built into the vehicle. Another test that they added was the AC test. This AC test was never performed on the old cycles. That means they start out in a box at 95 degrees. The air conditioning is on max, full recirc, and then they start the car. Now, the old tests had no AC use. They started out the vehicles about 86 degrees, and then they just drove them. That's great for fuel economy, but the average driver here, when it's 90 degrees outside, most are running air conditioning. The old EPA test cycles never used that before, so it never was put into the numbers that most people use AC when it's 85 or above. This new AC test, they basically ran the old city test cycle, but they're using AC on max, and it wasn't uncommon to see about a 30% drop in the city numbers. For example, the Prius on that AC test is somewhere around 38 to 40 miles per gallon in this particular AC test that they've added. The next one we have is a cold temp, and especially people here in Madison know, last February we had a cold snap where it wasn't uncommon to wake up and it was 10 to 15 degrees below zero. Those type of temperatures were never taken into account with the old FTP and highway numbers, the city and highway tests. Well, now the EPA has put that in place so that that is another factor that is created. And what they do is they basically, it's a 20-degree box. They put the vehicle in on a dynamometer at 20 degrees, full cold, and then they start the motor, and then they start the old city test. And that one, it's not uncommon to see a vehicle like a Prius or a Honda Civic Hybrid down into the mid-30s. So what they did with these new EPA and old EPA test cycles, they combined all five that are more realistic, and you'll see on the stickers next year a more realistic representation of what the average driver will get from their vehicle day in, day out, year-round. Of course, we all know that that's the average driver, and I'm here to make sure that we're all above average. And I know it's all in you, and I see it every day. I can see some of the faces out there that I know through my online community that make a 55 in a Prius. That's way below where they'd be driving, and I'd like to make sure that the average driver here that owns a Prius or a Honda Civic Hybrid or Lexus RX 400H can always beat the EPA. So let's get on to some of the basic techniques, and some of this was already talked about in Tony Schaefer's presentation earlier. What we're basically doing is we're taking the EPA test cycle, all the stops, all the starts that they do, we're smoothing that all out. We're doing basic vehicle setup to make it better than the vehicle that you received from Toyota the first day it came off the lot. For the setup, we're going to talk about four things. First thing is tire pressures. The reason why we increase tire pressures mostly is to reduce the rolling resistance coefficient of the tire itself, and to help that vehicle accelerate and decelerate and coast a lot easier on the motor, and to maintain the energy that you built in through the acceleration. You want to maintain that energy as you're coasting down and bleed it off slowly instead of using your brakes. Tire pressures is a controversial subject on the net. I recommend at a minimum max sidewall. You're perfectly legal, and here's some of the reasons for that. Besides the lower rolling resistance coefficient that you get with higher tire pressures, you also get better turn-in, better handling. You also get longer tire wear and more even tire wear. Because of that, you can say, well, I thought that you wear out the centers, or I thought that they would blow up. Tires are rated to explode somewhere over 250 pounds for most of them. So nobody's running 44 pounds in their tires today, no matter what vehicle they own and drive, is going to blow up their tires at 44 pounds. Max sidewall is my minimum recommendation, and some of those hypermilers go a lot higher than that day in and day out. For example, the Honda Insight community, they use a type of tire called the Bridgestone RE92. Their claim to fame is they usually last about 30,000 miles at the door pressure of around 35 pounds. Most in the Insight Hypermiling community, we run them around 55, and it's not uncommon to see them last 100,000 miles. So it's basically triple the longevity of what they would have at the standard tire pressures. For example, even on my Honda Accord at home, she's got some Michelin Energies. Those have been probably about 50,000 is the average Accord driver. I'm at 93,000, and they're only two-thirds worn out. So that gives you an example of tire pressures. Now, the negative to higher tire pressures is there's a lot more noise, vibration, and harshness. But the way that I recommend people approach tire pressures is they'll see 35 coming out of the factory, and or from the dealership. If they increase to 37 for a week, they won't notice anything. The next week, they increase to 39, they won't notice anything. The next week after that, they go to 41, they won't notice anything. The next week after that, they're at 44, they won't notice it. Once you're at 44 and then you go back to 35, you'll notice, yeah, it's a softer ride, but how come it handles so weak? These tires are flopping around, it feels like I'm driving a couch. I highly recommend the tire pressures for that, for all the reasons stated. Next, we go into a basic maintenance, and that's your air filter. You think, what's a simple air filter have to do with fuel economy? Well, air filters are one of the paths that cause a pumping loss in the engine. And if we have a new air filter, we can remove one impediment to fuel economy from the motor at any given time. It's not uncommon to see a dirty air filter to a new air filter increase your fuel economy by 10%. So I recommend every year brand new air filter in the spring. When you pull it out, you'll see it's dirty. Put in a new one, and it's not uncommon again to see 10% right off the bat. Because of the instrumentation in a Prius and a Honda Civic Hybrid, you'll see it as well on the instrumentation. So we've gone over tire pressures, gone over the air filter. Let's look at our oil change. What I highly recommend for oil changes is a high-quality synthetic recommended oil weight for your vehicle. For all the Hondas here, the Honda Civic Hybrids and Honda Insights, they can actually use 0W20. Although some of the Honda dealers may not have 0W20, they might have 5W20 or 5W30. The heavier weight oil that you put in your vehicle, the harder that engine has to work to spin it and to pump it around. Even in a Prius, I think it's 5W30 is the minimum recommended. If you're going to go with 5W30, there's a number called Kinematic Viscosity, and it's a type of measurement that tells you how hard it is to pump that fluid through a vehicle and how the gears are meshing with it in it. And because synthetic is lower kinematic viscosity, even for the same weight, it'll last longer and it'll give you a little bit more fuel economy. Now, we're only talking 2 to 3% here, but if you're putting 2.6 quarts of $10 or $5 quart oil in a Honda Insight, it's not costing you that much, and you can usually extend your oil changes out to 10 to 12,000. After that, we've got we've got tire pressures, we got the air filter, we got the type of oil. Let's talk about roof racks and stuff in your car. It's always best to remove everything you can, and I try to give real-world examples of some of the issues that I saw. My son's girlfriend the other day, she shows up in her Grand Am, and she's talking about her fuel economy. She's getting about 18 miles per gallon on a Grand Am that's rated 25 combined. And so we started talking about it, and one of the things I said, when's the last time you changed your oil? What are your tire pressures at? I'll pump them up. And then I said, let me take a look at your car. And we opened up the trunk. She had 500 pounds of books in the trunk. The whole thing was packed from one side to the other. And I says, so you're accelerating and driving around with these books. Why? Well, they're every book I had. I didn't have any place to store them. And I says, I can store them either in the garbage can or we can store them in a shelf somewhere. But that just gives you another example that, you see in the real world somebody driving a Grand Am at 18 miles per gallon that's capable of 25 without doing anything because they've got 500 pounds of books in the back of the car. So we removed all that, and her fuel economy came up to about 23 on the next tank, and I'm working on her now with fuel economy techniques. So you've got tire pressures, oil changes, you've got air filter for maintenance, and then you got the vehicle itself and what you can do. Once you're beyond that, that will easily get the average driver up to EPA driving the way they normally do, which is anybody from Chicago or Madison, Milwaukee, everybody's doing 75 miles an hour, unfortunately. Then we got some of the techniques involved, and we're just going to go over the basics. And I hate to say this one because everybody their eyes glaze over, but speed kills fuel economy. I want to give, for example, a Honda Civic, brand new 2006 Honda Civic, 2007 Honda Civic Hybrid. It's capable of 90 plus miles per gallon at 35 miles per hour. Now, how can that be when its EPA is rated at 49, 50, 51? It's just built into the vehicle that with low rolling resistance tires that come with them, with the capabilities that's built into the vehicle, that vehicle can get 90 miles per gallon, 35 miles an hour. When you say, I can't drive 35. Around the suburbs of any major area in the country, speed limits are usually 35 miles an hour. And if you can maintain that 35 miles an hour, she will give you 90 miles per gallon. That's a basic technique. Speed kills fuel economy. We've got drivers here that have done the Ford Escape Hybrid at 40 miles an hour. She'll give you 60 miles per gallon. So again, a huge box of a vehicle, 3,600 pounds, and yet the fuel economy at that speed, it's there. It's just that you can't stay there all the time, nor would you want to travel across country at 35 miles an hour. But when you do travel through that zone, just remember that those vehicles are capable of that if you place them into that area more often than not. What's that? No, that's Civic Hybrids worth 90. A non-hybrid Civic is good for about 50, 55 at that rate. A little higher for the non-hybrid. Okay? So now we have to talk about acceleration rates. A lot of people have talked about jackrabbit starts and stops killing fuel economy, and it's true. For the average driver, a jackrabbit start, it's not uncommon to see a normal driver in a non-hybrid hang around 5 miles per gallon in anything that they drive, a mid-size variety. I'll take example my Honda Accord at home. If I just standard jackrabbit start from 0 to about 15 miles an hour, I'm getting less than 5 miles per gallon over that period. Well, how do you get 55 to 60 miles per gallon out of Accord if your Jackrabbit starting at 5 miles per gallon, 0 to 15. If you have maybe 1/3 of that rate of Jackrabbit start, and you have the capabilities in the hybrids that most of you own out there, it's not uncommon to bring them up from 0 all the way to 50 at 30 plus miles per gallon versus the average Accord driver at 5 miles per gallon, and he's racing up to 50. So again, those are real world numbers, and I see them on the instrumentation in my Accord every day. There's reasons for a Jackrabbit start, emergencies, and also in a pulse and glide there's a reason for a higher pulse rate, but for now just keep your acceleration rates delicate as traffic allows, and you'll see an improvement in your fuel economy overall. The biggest hit of all has to do with stopping. All the energy that you put into a vehicle, if you hit the brakes right after you accelerate it, those brakes will take you down a lot faster than the time it took to accelerate, and it is throwing gasoline out the window. You touch the brakes, it's out the window. So what you want to do is use your brain and use the traffic that you see around you, use the lights around you, anticipate what's coming up. And if you don't have to use your brakes, by all means don't. It's something that we've lost touch with just because of the traffic that we drive in. But again, a Prius driver that can anticipate his stops and starts in his local daily commute, it's not uncommon for the best Prius drivers to average 80 miles per gallon back and forth to work every single day because they're anticipating, they're not using their brakes, and they're taking an acceleration rate that works with the Prius. So we've got some anticipation, some anticipatory focus is what I call it, and what that allows you to do is to basically drive without your brakes, only use them under emergency conditions or as traffic allows. Let's get into the Honda Insight and Honda Civic, the older model, the 2003 to 2005, have what's called a lean burn mode. For those of you that own those, you want to maintain lean burn as much as possible. And the way that you can tell you're in lean burn, there's not a light that comes up, there's nothing flashing that says you're in there, but you'll see your instantaneous on your instantaneous displays sitting between 80 and 85 miles per gallon on the Honda Civic, and you'll see them at 120 to 125 miles per gallon on the Honda Insight. When you see that, wouldn't it be nice to travel in that lean burn for as much as possible? Well, fortunately, we can teach that. However, Honda has limited that on high speeds where they just drop it out. But again, I've seen Honda Civics going down the road at 50 miles per gallon, Honda Civic hybrids, the older ones, in lean burn at 80 to 85 miles per gallon, yet they were only rated at 46.51 with a stick. The Honda Insight rated at 60, 66. The most fuel-efficient vehicle in America, unfortunately, they don't make them this year, but for those that own them, they've seen lean burn, and they actually give 120 miles per gallon at 45 to 50 miles per hour. Now, again, you can't travel 45 to 50 miles per hour on most interstates, but where you can, that's where you pick up the fuel economy and make up for all the losses that you're involved in heavy traffic. The Prius is a special type of vehicle because it has the ability to go what's called pulse and glide. And it's all built in, it's all natural. It's all natural for the vehicle, but the average driver doesn't know anything about it. Anytime that you're below 40 miles per hour in a Prius, it doesn't matter if it's a Prius 1 or a Prius 2, when you're coasting down, you can place it into what's called a glide mode. And basically what it is, the engine shut down, you are not putting any power to the pack, and you're not taking any power from the pack, and it's trying to place it into a glide mode where it's just coasting along, not burning any energy, and it's built right in. You just change your foot a little bit with the accelerator pedal, and it just glides down. A good pulsing glider, once in a warmed-up Prius, it's no problem to maintain 100 miles per gallon around town in traffic. And for example, I did a review on Cheryl Apple of the Madison Hybrid Group. I don't see her here right now. I have to thank her for the use of her vehicle. 2002 Prius 1. It's rated 4552. Through Chicago traffic, there was one particular instance when there was 13 miles of stop and crawl is what I call it. It took me an hour and 15 minutes to travel 13 miles. In that hour and 15 minutes, I saw 4 of its 6 5-minute bars pegged at over 100 miles per gallon. Through that segment, sitting in traffic and slowly accelerating and stopping and braking and all the craziness that everybody's been in here has been stuck in any kind of traffic situation, that Prius offered 90 miles per gallon in a place where most people were getting 5 miles per gallon or less. So if you use the tools that are built into your various hybrids, you can really change fuel economy that you receive. And that's pulse and glide, anything below 40. The Prius can also be maintained into what they call warp stealth. If you're above 40 degrees, or if you're above 40 miles per hour, the engine must spin over. But you do not have to use any fuel while that engine's spinning over. So if you're coming down from the interstate, let's say you're going 60 miles an hour down the highway, and you want to slow down for an off-ramp, start planning it about 3/4 mile ahead. You might let off, put it into warp stealth, where you're not dragging, you're not using regen to put any power to the pack, you're using a little bit of pack energy to keep the motor over until you glide down below 40. Then from 40 on down, you just put her into her standard glide mode where you're not using any energy per the mimic screens. And just that little bit, you've basically glided the vehicle for 3/4 of a mile without using any fuel, without burning any excess energy. And it's not uncommon if you're a Prius highway driver, you use that technique for every slowdown to see over 60 miles per gallon on the highway. Again, it's 50 mile per gallon rated, but 60 is easy enough if you use the basic techniques. And all it is it's a slowdown technique. With that, I think I can start answering questions because I've gone over the real basics here. And I'll just give you an example of some of the things that we've seen. In the Prius Marathon, traveling along the Ohio River in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we took a Toyota Prius, 2004 Toyota Prius, to over 109 miles per gallon, over 1,397 miles per gallon on the same tank. We have a Japanese driver, a female actually, who averaged 116 miles per gallon on her normal commute over a whole tank, somewhere around 1,455 miles. The Insight Marathon last year, there was six of the best drivers in the country got together, and we took a Honda Insight on one tank of fuel to 164 miles per gallon over 2,254 miles. Now, these are the extremes. The lady in Japan, she does that back and forth to work because she has speed limits of 18 to 25 miles per hour. But it just goes to show you that these vehicles in that lower speed realm, and all of us drive it every day because we don't go from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds and then sit at 60 miles an hour until we get to work. We all travel through that 0 to 40 range where these hybrids really start to sing. And with that, I'd like to take any questions that you may have. The question was about engine block heaters and rear tire pressures. Some in the Prius community like to see an offset. They'll use 2 pounds higher pressure in the front than the rear, and it has to do with balancing out the weight of the vehicle with a heavier engine up front. That's fine. I recommend going max sidewall no matter what you drive. And the Prius 44 on the Goodyear Integrities that are non-touring model, I highly recommend going there. An engine block heater is another setup device that the Hypermilers use even in the summer. We love to see our temperatures up in the 120, 130 range before we even take off. For those in the wintertime, an engine block heater will let the hybrid function as a hybrid a lot sooner than without them. And the amount of energy that you consume of, let's say, 10 to 15 cents to heat that block up and heat the coolant temp up to maybe that 110, 120 is 10 or 15 cents. It's going to save you maybe 50 cents in fuel over the first 4 miles of a Prius, because in the cold weather it's not uncommon to see them down in the 30 mile per gallon range for quite a ways until they get warmed up and everything starts to happen. It's a protection of the Toyota Prius for both emissions and for the engine itself, that they will run a little rich, and they will not allow you to get into their hybrid components, EV driving and things like that, until they're warmed up. So, and it's basically an emissions thing. They've got to get the catalyst heat up in the cat, and they infer that from the coolant temp. Any other questions? We have a question here about engine braking or putting the Insight in neutral in a 5-speed Insight. What you see when you're in an Insight and you let off the gas, you go into regen and you get what's called fuel cut. Above, let's say, 20 miles per hour, it's great to be in the no fuel use area in a Honda Insight. However, under regen, you are actually using the engine and the draw that sticks the power back in the pack, slowing you down faster than if you were coasting. Coasting, even engine on, we call it a nice on, neutral, ice on, internal combustion engine on. At higher speeds, will save you more fuel, even though the engine's idling in lean burn mode. It'll save you more fuel than regenning from 60 down to 20. I hope that answers your question, that above 20 miles per hour, I would definitely use a Nissan versus using regen. Below that, you get into your fuel cut, and then you'll want to go into your auto stop. A 5-speed will go into auto stop at 19 miles an hour, the CVT at 5 miles per hour. Definitely use those as a safe technique. It is, but once they're warmed up, I've seen auto stop in a Honda Insight 5-speed at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't recommend fuel preservatives. The diesel drivers would have to be concerned in the colder weather and stuff like that. But from the people that I speak with and from our own experience, fuel preservatives, fuel additives, they do not help fuel economy, as some of that would be. If you have a tank that's going to last over 3 to 4 months, some stable will definitely help. But hopefully, if you have a tank that lasts 3 to 4 months, God bless you. Question was, he's got aluminum wheels. I guess they're not OEM, right? They're aftermarket? Oh, they are factory. It's not so much stop the leakage, because every tire, no matter how well it's sealed, will leak some. Some leak faster than others. The key to higher pressures is to maintain them. If you can check your tire pressures every 2 to 3 weeks, that's the best thing going. And you get what you get, If you have a problem with every 2 days, it's best to take it in to a tire shop, and they'll find that either there's a seal, there's a valve stem, or that there's actually tires that have hole or something. I've never heard of that. I'm sorry to hear that, especially from an OEM wheel, but that's something that I haven't experienced with. Sorry.
During the race, for example, talking about in some way triggering the car to maintain some speed at much higher efficiency. We're talking about just lifting off.
Okay, the question had to do with maintaining stealth mode in a Prius above 40 miles per hour. And what you're doing is you're placing it into a mode we call warp stealth. What it is, the Prius has to protect, this is a little technical, Prius has to protect one of its MG sets. And those MG sets, they want to maintain less than 6,500 on average. Some can go up to 10,000. But the way they do that is they actually let the pack push that motor and keep it spinning over above 40 miles an hour to protect that MG set. Okay? What you can do is place it into what's called warp stealth. And you don't let off, because that's regen. That means power is coming from your wheels, through the MG, and then back to the pack. What you want to do is let off and then push a little bit back on, just like you would in a normal glide in a Prius, where you see energy coming from the pack to the MG set and then to the engine. Okay? So it's a special mode where you do apply a little bit of pressure on the pedal, but you don't apply enough pressure to let the engine start powering the vehicle again. And in that mode, you can't maintain speed. It's a glide mode. But you can stop fuel use, and you can get a longer glide distance from high speeds until you hit your transition into a regular glide. Does that answer your question? MG set is a motor generator set, and the Prius has 2 of them. And both of them do different things, but the way the Mimic screen, it only shows one MG set in a Prius Mimic, and you can take advantage of that screen to place them into these various modes, and it really does make a difference.
Talk about the different categories of gas, whether you have gas that's high grade, middle grade, or low grade. What's your recommendations?
Okay, the question had to do with the type of gas, and that means like octane 87, octane 89, and octane 91. For all the hybrids here today, except for some of the high-end Lexuses, 87 octane is the best fuel to use. It's the least inexpensive, and anything more than that does not give you any more fuel economy. What I do recommend is use a top-tier provider. That means you don't use an off-brand gas, but that's my own opinion, because gasoline comes from the same place. If it goes to Shell, if it goes to a local Mobil, or it goes to Tom and Joe's local gas station. The gas is the same with different additives. It usually comes from the same refinery from a local area. A top-tier gas station, however, has a lot of turnover. That means they don't have gas sitting in a tank for months on end. It might be days on end, and that means you get the freshest gas. Now, there's difference between reformulated gas, non-reformulated gas. There's actually 18 different boutique fuels at last count, last time I looked, throughout the country. And I got one guy saying there's even more. And unfortunately, everybody has different gas. You are stuck with the gas that is available in your area. If it's E10 equipped, if it's RFG, California clean burning gasoline, stuff like that. But it's not much that you can do. However, I do recommend that you purchase 87 octane. It'll give you the most fuel efficiency, and in fact, I've seen some studies where it gives more fuel efficiency than the premium or octane of 91. Does that help? Okay. Anybody else? Ethanol. Ethanol hurts us. I live in Chicago, and we're E10. I believe all of Wisconsin is E10 as well. In E10-based gasoline, you lose about 2 to 3% of your fuel economy by running E10. And that's just the way it is, and there's nothing you can do about it unless you can find an area that doesn't have E10. But with the Midwest being as corn-based as it is, you're going to have to buy it. Does that answer your question? I don't have it. Find those stations. Get where you want to buy your gas. The question was aerodynamic modifications and improvements. There is, and I cannot deny that there is. However, to put aerodynamic modifications on a vehicle, you're talking about the extreme limits of what people want to do with their vehicles. The Prius already has a coefficient of drag of 0.26, the Honda Insight at 0.25. Vehicles are getting sleeker and sleeker as the years go on. By decreasing the wind resistance, let's say 5%, by adding some underbody panel or something off the rear, a boat tail or something, you might see maybe 2 to 3% for each modification. But it can get kind of extreme because now your car starts to have stuff that's either falling off in the middle of winter when snow packs into it, or for example, there's one guy on our site that has created a boat tail and a front end for a Honda Civic DX, and it looks like something out of NASA. So there are limits, but aerodynamic qualities do improve with every add-on, but there are some limits that I just don't see them improving nearly as much as technique. Very good question from the young man in the second row. What he said is the Prius has 2 screens, an energy screen and a consumption screen. The energy screen shows you energy flows from the battery and from the engine and from the wheels and how the energy mixes. The other screen, as any Prius driver knows, that's where they see their 5-minute bars and their instantaneous and their actual fuel economy, what they're receiving. What I like to do, I'm not a Prius owner, but I've driven enough of them. I like to swap back and forth. For example, when I'm in a glide, I want to be on my energy screen and make sure I have a mimic of no arrows. However, I'll swap back to my consumption screen to verify what I'm doing is actually working. So I'm usually swapping back and forth in the way that I drive a Prius about every 2 minutes. Is usually what my average would be, is swap back and forth. Does that help? The question had to do with windows down or windows up versus fans on a vehicle. I was at the Ford Escape Hybrid Experience almost 2 years ago, and Ford actually had a study of how the radio and how the fans affect fuel economy. Running in a Ford Escape Hybrid for the average driver on the city test, he lost 0.1 miles per gallon by running the radio. I'm not expecting anybody here not to run the radio, but there's a hit with it. Another example is with windows down and windows up. Again, it was about a half mile or 0.6 miles per gallon in the city test with the windows down versus windows up. When you start talking about fans, if anybody has seen CanView in a Prius, you run the internal fans and you can actually see, I'm talking about your just normal ventilation fans. If you run them at full, you can actually see them draw off the sock. You'll see it come down just sitting there. And it's not just the normal overhead of the vehicle. Those fans draw a lot of current. I would recommend it Prius drivers in particular, the way that it's shaped is to drop your left window down about an inch and your right rear window down about an inch, and you get a nice cross flow without affecting its aerodynamics. However, once it gets above maybe 85 degrees and it's a little uncomfortable, AC can sometimes help a Prius driver maintain good fuel economy because that battery pack assists and will cause drag on the vehicle depending on its temperature. And if you keep that battery pack similar to the temperature that you'd like to be at, it operates its best. So I do recommend using AC when it's above 90 degrees, but I don't recommend using AC at max or set at 60 degrees in a Prius. I recommend, run it at a reasonable 75 or 78. That way it's just cycling. It's keeping you comfortable, keeping the pack comfortable, and it's doing everything it can to maintain the good fuel economy. Let me add a little bit here. During the Prius Marathon, I took out a couple who just got back. They had a brand new 2004 Prius. I think it had like 3,000 miles on it. It was loaded with camping gear. I took them out on a clinic in this non-set-up Prius. It was 86 degrees. They had their AC set at 76 or 78 degrees. They got over 86 miles per gallon on that clinic course, and all I did was just guide them when to glide, when to pulse, what to do with lights up ahead, with light timing, things like that. They had the AC on, and they got over 86 miles per gallon on Prius. So you can squeeze good miles out of them. However, if you can run without, it's always best there until you get so hot that you're uncomfortable beyond belief and that batteries start to become uncomfortable as well. That one is a Prius-specific question, and I will get you an answer for that because I know there's some Prius experts here that will be able to answer for that. Just come up here afterwards, and I'll be able to help you out on that. Okay? Anybody else? Okay, the question was, if you have 44-pound maximum tire pressure on the sidewall, can you go above that? Legally, I can't tell you to go over that, but I can tell you that I do. I usually run 55 to 60 in all my vehicles. And with that, I've got tire wear that's just absolutely minimal. I've got better traction, shorter braking distances. One thing is I've got some noise vibration and harshness that the average driver may not be able to put up with, but the fuel economy improvements are significant up to a point. Every pound over, like let's say 35, you might get a quarter mile per gallon. Once you're up at 50, every 1 pound might give you something you might even be able to see. So the difference between 44 and 50, there's, let's say, 2 miles per gallon for a Prius and a Honda Civic. That's, pretty extreme. 50 to 60, you might see a half. So the higher you go, the curve just drops off, and even running 80, you're getting such an insignificant increase. But if you're at maximum sidewall, which is 44 pounds on the Prius and the Honda Civic, some tires, some of the Honda Civics actually have 51 max sidewall. I recommend taking that as a recommendation, and you're perfectly legal and warrantable. Any other questions? There's been some studies on high pressure in tires up to and above max sidewall, and hydroplaning actually decreases with the higher pressure. The reason why is it has to do with your footprint is decreased a little bit. Hydroplaning goes down, and braking distances can actually be shorter with higher pressures, even in rain. It's only in snow that the higher pressures will increase your braking distances. So there is some trade-offs in that side, but usually it's for the best with braking distances. Anybody else? Okay, The question had to do with uneven tire wear at higher pressures, and especially on Prius 1s, they had a type of Bridgestone RE92 that would run at the tire pressures in the doors. They would actually wear the sidewalls out, usually within 25,000 miles. At higher pressures, and that, again, 44 pounds, that sidewall or side area of the tire wear disappeared, and you actually got the full life of the vehicle, of the tire out of the vehicles, even in the Prius 1. Same thing goes with Prius 2. Same goes with all my non-hybrids as well. The tire wear is more even at higher pressures. There's steel belts inside, they don't stretch. But what they do is you don't have the flexing on the sides, and that's where you get the side tire wall, side of the tires wear. That will basically disappear, and you get even wear across at the higher pressures. That help? Okay, with that, I'd like to thank, again, Linda and the Hybridfest team to put this together. It's been a great day, and I hope you guys all